this is Craig Powell. Many of you know him because he's participated in our other conferences in the past. He's currently a neurologist at the University of Texas Southwestern here in Dallas. He was recently named the chair of the Department of Neurobiology at the University of Alabama at Birmingham's School of Medicine, and he will also be the director of the Civitan International Research Center, where he will lead research on developmental disabilities. Dr. Powell is just going to really just offer a few last reflections on PMS research.
Thanks, Geraldine. So I'm supposed to summarize a whole day of exciting and boring science. And I know you guys have, everybody, all I see in this room every day, every time I come to this meeting, is 100% of blood, sweat, and tears, and heart, and drive. Everybody in this room has family to deal with, children to take care of, work to go to, health to maintain of their own, hopefully, if there's any time in between, and everything else in your lives. And yet there are a couple of people in this room, and more than a couple actually, that take care of all those things and do 1,000 more things. And I just want to start by saying that two of those people, only two, are Geraldine Bliss and Abby Laganoff. You all, I know that there are changes in the board, and there's changes in the officers of this foundation, but I know that you all know the people that I know and interact with on a regular basis. People like Sue Lomas, people like Megan O'Boyle, who has run the registry as a non-scientist for many years, the entire board, and all the volunteers that make this meeting possible. And that's really all of you in this room, right? So I have personally contributed the money for the salaries of everyone that I've just mentioned, that they get for doing all this. And so if you think the thermostat in the room is a little bit off, or the weather outside isn't perfect, or your hotel lobby isn't as accessible as you might like it to be, or the room is a little too crowded to get in and out, all that's true, right? But really, they've worked enormously hard, hundreds of emails, extra trips to the hell that is Dallas, Texas. I can say that because I live here, and I love it, and it only snows and ices one day a year. But think about all the audio-visual coordination, the schedules, the changing the schedule on the fly. Think about all that and who's doing that, and it's a lot of those people I just mentioned, plus a lot more. There are about, I don't know how many scientists are here, clinicians and pharmaceutical company representatives, foundation board members, and others. There's at least 25 plus scientists that have been in and out of this meeting and will be in and out of this meeting during the course of the several days that is the conference. None of us are paid by the foundation to be here, although some people's travel is reimbursed to get here, right, to be here. And, you know, all of you are here, and just by being here, you're contributing to the research that is done, okay? I was talking to some of the adult parents up in the front yesterday, and, you know, just by the fact that your child has been diagnosed with a genetic change, that's a genetic difference, one of many, has led to the discovery that the SHANK3 gene is the critical gene for most of what we call Phelan-McDermid syndrome, all of what we call Phelan-McDermid syndrome. And then, you know, there are many other disorders out there, many other genes that are involved in other disorders that are similar or very different than Phelan-McDermid syndrome. And everybody in this room, at some level, has contributed to this effort of discovery and that is science, right? So you are the scientists as much as we are, and you're contributing as much or more than we are. And you guys, as a foundation, raise, a few $100,000 a year, maybe more. I don't know the exact numbers. And I can remember this foundation, when I first became involved or, became aware of this foundation. There were a couple of dads at a table at the Society for Neuroscience meeting. Randy Riddle, I believe, yeah. And all they wanted to do was for someone to make a knockout mouse model of SHANK3 gene, right? And that was one of the goals, and to bring families and their kids together so that they could learn from one another and so that they had a place to be. Well, you guys have accomplished so much more than that in just a very short period of time, right? So your couple, 300, 400, 500, whatever, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars you raise every year has turned into literally millions of dollars in federally funded research, pharmaceutical funded research, foundation funded research. Autism Science Foundation funds SHANK3 research. Autism Speaks, Simon's Foundation. You guys are the main engine, the drivers of making that happen. Not just by your very coming to this meeting or existing on the web or being a Facebook group or being in the registry, but by the blood, sweat, and tears that you and every member of this foundation puts in every day for the year round. And so what does that $1 million in research turn into? What have all your efforts, all you've got is a panel that often says, we don't know, 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 we don't know. And a bunch of scientists who put up EEGs and squiggles and things you don't understand, and who cares? I just want my kid to be a little better, just a tiny bit better. Well, we've heard about at no less than 5 clinical trials of new drug therapies directed specifically at this population, Phelan-McDermid syndrome. And that is something that 10 years ago I would have said there's absolutely no way I would be standing up here and talking about 10 years from now, right? Just unheard of, believe it or not. 2 of them are completed. More are enrolling, and even more are planned or just in the beginning stages. And there's more studies, as you saw over the course of the last day, really, being done on behavioral issues in Phelan-McDermid syndrome, GI issues specifically in Phelan-McDermid syndrome, poop collection, genetic studies that are still ongoing through the registry. People are still curating those data and making sure that the diagnosis of Phelan-McDermid is accurate in every single patient, because that's required for the next step to figure out what percentage of your kids have X, Y, and Z complications. Okay, regression, for example. We just heard a great example. Epigenetics, whatever that means, right? Doesn't matter. These are important things that are being studied every day. So I think the message is that hope, which all of you have in spades and should continue to have, money, which you have or will be hopefully contributing to raising, science, which we love to do and which more and more people are becoming involved in, specifically with SHANK3 and Phelan-McDermid syndrome, specifically because of you in this room and the people who are advocating on your behalf for free, unpaid, and family participation. All those things added together have led to potential new therapies and more hope than ever for Phelan-McDermid syndrome, okay? I mean, we've heard about drugs, IGF-1, oxytocin, ERK-MAP kinase inhibitors, new molecular targets, new targets for epilepsy that are being targeted in the SHANK3 population specifically. Behavioral plans, how to fix aggression, how to fix tantrums, how to get evaluated. I learned a new phrase, FBA, functional behavioral analysis. It's different, apparently, than applied behavioral analysis, although some of the same principles can be used for both. Communication strategies. Many of you have the luxury of being able to use pads or iPads or communication cards or just cards or gestures or grunts and moans and other signals. Clapping is a big one that we've heard about at our table yesterday. And then gene therapies we've heard about. The possibility that maybe we could fix the underlying genetic problem. And those studies are being thought about and ongoing in mouse models, ongoing in human neurons in a dish. And so this is the hope, right? The best example I can give you is who's heard of spinal muscular atrophy? Keep your hand up. Who's heard of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease? Okay. Who's heard of a baby getting Lou Gehrig's disease, or essentially that, right? A few people, scientists mostly. But the fact of the people at my table from yesterday. So these are babies that are born with SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and they basically have infantile onset Lou Gehrig's disease, and many of them are no longer with us after age 5. Not all of them. I'm just don't quote me on that, the exact age at which there are different flavors and different varieties. But these kids progressively lose motor function until they can no longer control their diaphragm or their swallowing, and they pass away uniformly before age 10 or 12, okay, in certain forms. There's now gene therapy that's been done and is FDA approved and costs a lot of money that goes into the spinal fluid that turns on another gene that looks like the gene that's missing and changes it, and these kids are now living beyond age 5 and they're walking, whereas they were essentially what we call just a floppy baby that's never going to learn to walk. And that's a miracle, right? I'm not no one up here is promising a miracle for Phelan-McDermid syndrome, but we're working as hard as we can to get there. And so there is hope. And you guys are the catalysts and the drivers of all of these new discoveries, each and every one of you. It's not just your board. It's not just this mysterious website and this mysterious registry that you put stuff in and you feel like you're getting nothing out of. You're not. That's not the case at all. So the foundation isn't some magical entity that provides all this and makes this happen from nothing, right? It's you. It's your families. It's your friends. It's your communities, your social networks that drive this, right? You now have an executive director who makes a salary, who's in charge of making everything work the way it's supposed to. You have a registry that costs money to keep it alive. It's not just you put it on the web and you enter your data and it just happens and it stays there magically. There's a cost to keep that going every year. There's now a coordinator for the registry, and the foundation pays that person's salary to curate the data. You need desperately to have a scientist in charge of helping your organization decide what's the best strategy going forward to use your resources, the families, the registry, the gosh knows what else is coming on the horizon, to make the hope a little bit more promising, right? To nudge things in the right direction. And all that takes money. I think you need a shake-up on your scientific advisory council, right? So a lot of us have been are directly involved in Phelan-McDermid syndrome research and have just by hanging around have ultimately benefited from some of the dollars that go to researchers directly. And that's helped to fund UT Southwestern, for example, with a little bit of money to do patient sign-ups for the Developmental Synaptopathies Consortium, and Stanford for the same reason, so that you don't have to travel quite as far, many of you, to get to one of those sites, okay? And then NIH adds to that hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s every year, and it's never enough. So you are the only ones who can go out and raise money. I don't personally benefit from that money. So I feel like I can feel comfortable saying that if you want more of this science to be done, you have to go out and raise money for the foundation, not for me, not for the scientists, not to put money in anybody's pocket, except to keep this organization alive and to keep the hope coming and to leverage these relatively small dollars into these millions of dollars, into these studies, into the letters of support that go to multiple grants that are written by Geraldine and Megan O'Boyle, and they have to check out everybody's IRB, and there's a lot of work that goes into all that. And they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to complain about it to you because you guys are all support, you're all families and you're all friends and colleagues, right? So there's more than 10 animal models, different animal models of SHANK3 gene mutations for Phelan-McDermid. Rats, mice, you name it. There's more than 10 of you in the foundation, way more than 10, that have donated cells, but there's more than 10 independently created human neurons in a dish from people with Phelan-McDermid syndrome. Drug companies are screening drugs on those neurons and in those mouse models. And none of it would have happened without this foundation. None of the science would have happened without this foundation. None of the registry would have happened without this foundation. And so you are a part, each and every one of you is an integral part of this research. And you may get an email because you're part of this foundation, or a bulletin in the newsletter that says, if you live near Mount Sinai, they're doing clinical trial X, Y, and Z. If you live at near Stanford, they're doing this. If you live in Dallas or Birmingham or wherever around Chicago, you name it, participate in this study. And that's a very personal decision, and you have to think hard and long about what you want to do and how you want to contribute personally. So this is not for you to raise money for scientists or me. It's money to lobby Congress, to lobby NIH for increased research dollars focused on your disorder. It's money to lobby the pharma industry to stay engaged in this particular rare disease. It's money to maintain, curate, and grow the registry, to develop standards and clinical centers of excellence, right? And the ECHO project, where there are experts that are virtual, to whom your doctors can speak. So the science you saw today and yesterday is all about you. It's all for you, but you're an integral part of it. And so I would just urge, I think you all deserve a round of applause for being involved, for coming to the meeting, for bringing your kids, for not bringing your kids. Thank you to those of you who didn't, because there's a good reason you didn't. And thank goodness, right, for you and for everybody. And so I'm incredibly grateful to everybody for being here and listening to sometimes boring talks and sometimes really important pearls of wisdom. Functional behavioral analysis, GI transit studies, don't do this diet, do that diet, watch what happens when you change this or that. And all the scientists are available to hear your stories during this meeting, and I just want you all to realize how important what you're doing and what your foundation is doing. And I don't represent you or your foundation. I'm just here as a scientist trying to make a small difference in the scope of things. So give yourselves a round of applause. And when you leave, take your hope and your frustrations and raise money for the foundation, because it doesn't go into my pocket, and it certainly doesn't go into the board members' pockets or anybody, any of the volunteers' pockets. Thank you.
Amen. Craig Powell. As Craig was talking, I'm getting text messages from board members saying, wow, I mean, Craig is quite the pitch man, isn't it? He hit a home run there. You could not have said it better. I know that's exactly what Sue Lomas wants to convey, and all of our board members as well. And I didn't expect that, Craig. I thought you were going to talk science, so thank you.